All right, all right. We are live today here on Facebook, but I'm also going to put this on my podcast, Freedom Motivated, because I think that this is a conversation that needs to be had, one that hasn't been had and isn't being had, and it takes a lot of courage to have it. So I am so thankful that Rob Jonkhans here has agreed to be here with me and have this conversation. I was just saying while we were off camera, my husband pointed out your account on Instagram, which I'll let you share in a little bit. He pointed it out a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "You got to check out this guy. You got to check out what he's doing and what he's saying." And we had some laughs because of some of the videos that you had up there, right? It made us feel better. It made us feel like we weren't alone. It's like, oh yes, this is exactly like how we need to talk about these things, because it is almost comical how the last couple
Yep.
of years have played out when you actually take a step back and like view everything from a balcony as opposed to being in it. And
100%.
it's one of those things that um it's an uncomfortable conversation, and I'm going to put a warning out here, okay? Because there's about 30% of the population that is going to be like, yes, we hear you, we know,
Mhm.
we understand, we're with you, right? There's going to be 30% of the population that is going to be like, these people are quack. We need to report them. We need to, they need to disappear.
Uh,
They don't need to have influence. We need to get them out of here, right? And we're not here to sway those minds. I'm telling you the truth. We're not here to have that conversation. We're just here to share experience. We're here to share a critical conversation that you could be having with your friends, because there are still people in the middle that know that something was up over the last couple of years. They know that something wasn't quite right, and they
no.
can't put their finger on it, right? Maybe they regret some decisions over the last couple of years with health choices. Maybe they regret some decisions on how they behave towards certain family members or friends. Maybe it's a point of embarrassment or of uncomfortableness because everyone just wants to brush it over and say COVID's over. We don't even talk about that anymore. That's not even a
Mm,
thing anymore, right?
yeah.
And so I think that this conversation is so critical to have, and I'm thankful that you're willing to have it with me and that you have the courage to do so. So, Rob, I want you to introduce yourself. I know that you're a realtor in Ontario. You've got a great family. I want you to introduce yourself, and we're just going to have a really in-depth conversation about the last couple of years, and some of the things that didn't make sense to you, some of the things that didn't make sense to me, some of the things that kind of woke me up to what was real and what wasn't in the world.
Mhm.
When there is a controlling media that is operated and funded by the government, which is
Mm,
really only happening in communist countries. I'm going to
mhm,
say that out loud right
mhm,
away.
mhm.
And people can think I'm crazy or not, or you might think, yeah, why is somebody not talking about this? So, Rob, can you
Yeah,
please introduce yourself and talk a
sure.
little bit about how this all came to be?
Oh, how it all came to be. My name's Rob Jonkhans. Yes, I'm an Ontario realtor. Probably shouldn't be as public as I am. A lot of people have said that, but it's just not who I am. I always have to do what I think is, the right move. Early on in this, very early, the third week of March, I have a lot of immigrant friends, and we were serving our quarantine because we had just come back from Florida as the border was closed. And my buddy came over and told me, who's been here about 24 years, and he said, "Buddy, we're going communist. We're going communist." And I've shared this story no less than 50 times over the last, however long, how many years we're in now. And I initially scoffed a little bit. I said, "Oh, come on, man. We're in Canada. 2
Yep.
weeks. I had a couple family members who had some health issues, and well, just sort of what's a couple weeks." He goes, "This is how it starts." And by May, I was fully on side with him. I do have a bit of a history background, and a lot of European governments, totalitarian governments, and what you just said about the media is, the media's job, their one and only job, is to hold the government to account. And at some
Yes.
point, it went from a blue collar job to a white collar job. When I grew up in the '80s, there was investigative reports and investigative stuff, and it really was, you had to be careful. And now they just amplify what the government says, the talking points, the camera angles when there's protests to make sure they catch the smaller group and make them look bigger. And it is just for, I could go on and on. I don't want to take too much of the intro here. I could just not stop. But like just quickly, an example of that. when I was in Ottawa a bunch during the trucker convoy, proud to say I was there. One of the best times of anyone's life who was there. It was just absolutely incredible. But you'd walk around and enjoy truly the best days of the last few years, but probably of your life if you were there. And then you'd go back to the hotel and you'd turn on CBC radio and you'd listen to these talking heads that weren't there and are putting some sort of spin on it. And they're telling us everything was lies. Every single thing was a pure lie. And, you'd laugh at first when you hear this. And then you'd kind of, if you have a deep thinker, then you go to the pit of your stomach and you'd kind of go, oh my God, this is Canada right now, and, the word democracy is people need to look up what it means because we are not in a democracy anymore. So yeah, hopefully that's not too long of an intro for you.
No, it's so interesting because I've been working on social media for the last 8 years, and I have seen over the years the censorship. I've seen the words that we're allowed to use. You'll notice in my title, I've spelled it with zeros and a one. Right? Because we're already going to be censored because of the conversation. There's already AI checking all the conversations and everything that's going out there, and I know that Meta is actually being sued right now in the US to give up all their data to basically tell on the people that they think were spreading misinformation over COVID, that we're speaking, a lot of the things that are now coming true, right? That the jab was not safe and effective. All those things are coming to light, yet many people are just shoving that under the rug as well because it doesn't fit the decisions that they made. And I understand that. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I am not perfect. But man, do I have love and compassion for my family, for the people around me, for my country, right? Like I live in Mexico now because it was the decision that we made to, create a positive situation out of a negative one. It was one where we could protect our daughter, which we'll talk a little bit, about our kids and stuff. But it was one that we felt really compelled to do because we didn't have a lot of support when we were up there over the last few years. And so I've seen all this censorship start to come through Facebook and Instagram and Meta, and tried to tell people, like I tried to say, hey, look, like they're stealing free speech from us. And like that's never ever, censorship has never gone well in history. Like this is not a good decision. And while we were sitting here in Mexico, I want to address the trucker convoy because people believe what they see on TV or they hear on the radio or whatever that is. And I want to address that because I remember sitting here listening to Kid Carson in Vancouver. He got fired the day that he said, we're only telling one side of the story here. We're not allowed to talk. He's like, it's all over globally, all over the news that this convoy is going on, that there's this massive protest, and we're not allowed to talk about it. And he's like, that's wrong. And he's like, and he knew he was going to lose his job over that. I had the pleasure of being on his podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we had this conversation. And when we saw what was happening, when we saw the videos, and I'd like you to talk about going there and your experience there. When we saw the videos, of all of the bridges that you would drive under that had patriotic Canadians fighting for our freedom. Like I was in tears. And my husband was in tears. And we're like, I have hope for this country. I have hope that people have heart. And, and it's so interesting because the media painted it as like this terrible thing. And they planted certain people in that situation to make it look bad. And I don't think that was the experience. And so many people were like, oh, this is such an annoyance. This is so terrible that we're doing this to the community of Ottawa. We're stealing business from them. People are honking their horns all the time. This is awful, right? And I'm like, it's an inconvenience for them for how long? Because the last 2.5 years have been an inconvenience for us. For everybody else, right? We weren't able to go to restaurants. We weren't able to put our kids in sports. We weren't able to take our kids swimming. We weren't able to do all these things. We were, uninvited to things. We all of a sudden weren't able to do the things that we love or be around the people that we love. And now you're going to say that this protest from the goodness of our hearts, you're going to turn it into hate, which, by the way, happened again yesterday on March 4th, where parents were fighting for their rights. They were fighting for their parental rights, which we will talk about. But I want you to talk a little bit about your experience, and we're getting right into it, aren't we?
Sure,
and then we'll talk a little bit
about
how all this came to be and like how you kind of woke up to this, because I know that, that conversation. with your friend was part of it, but I know that there's also been
Yeah,
other experiences that you've
big
had.
time.
So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about the trucker convoy and like, the calling that you felt to go and bring your children, right? If it was a
Mhm.
dangerous, awful place, why
Mhm.
would you ever bring your kids, right? So like,
Yeah.
do you want to share a little bit about
Sure.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. No. And it's not like I'm just some crazy guy that went, I'm going to Ottawa, and I just, hopped in the trucker's car and just sped there. I had a lot of thought. I'm very methodical. I worked a little bit of security a long time ago, and I've always, head on a swivel. I know my surroundings. So when we decided to go down for that first weekend, I knew I had to go. I knew I had to be there. We actually, because we were being careful, we booked a hotel in Canada, which is, about 20, 30 minutes just outside. We did, because I didn't know what it was going to be like. And I went down with one buddy and my 16-year-old son. And the three of us, we left just about 40 minutes in front of the convoy leaving London, Ontario, which is about a 6-hour drive. We knew the convoy was going through London, and we were just in front of them. And we had no idea what that ride was going to become. Um, every single overpass, the entire way, like just think about the planning and the people behind the scenes that organized the time to have people there, like all the way, all the way, all the way. People were flags, shouting, groups. It was so cold. It was such a cold, cold time. And that ride from start to finish, when we arrived in Ottawa, we said, like, we were completely hoarse. I think my car horn is like, it's working at about 25% since that trip. And it was just the most incredible drive any of us have ever had. There's no doubt in our minds. It was letting out all of the negativity of stuff that you just touched on, being put in the corner, so to speak, for a few years. It was just absolutely incredible. So we stayed in Canada, and we thought we would drive in and maybe take a cab if it was really bad. So funny now looking back on that with hindsight, because the first time we drove there, the very first day, we parked, we found a spot, we're kind of worried and checking things. We're like, oh, this isn't so bad. It's not so bad. And then we started, it took no time to figure out. It was absolutely incredible there. Everybody was just, the only thing I can compare it to, the only thing that's close to me that I can sort of try to share with people what it felt like is when the London Knights won the Memorial Cup in 2005. And I was at that game, watching them win the final game. And everybody flooded out of the downtown London into the streets. Just the pure joy and controlled pandemonium of positive emotions, complete strangers, everybody's best friends immediately. There was not 1 ounce of negativity that I saw in any of the 3 weekends, like 4-day weekends, plus I did go down one night the following week, just before they closed the door on everything. But it was just phenomenal. The only negativity, I hate to say it, but I call it like it is, was from the police. The police were fantastic the first weekend. The parliamentary security force, I can't remember what they're called. They were amazing, getting pictures with us, talking to us, being very, very friendly. But they got different orders by week 2. It was very obvious. They got different orders. The one guy that we talked to said, "Can we get a picture with you?" And he's like, "You can take it from over there, but I can't be in it now." Like, he could be in it, but not intentionally in it. And it was obviously, that's not him. He wanted to be. He wanted to be. So the police just began to tighten the noose, and we knew that we needed more people there. But it was absolutely incredible, just an incredible experience that I'll never forget. And my 16-year-old son said that was the best time in his life. And we've done a lot of fun things.
Wow,
So,
that's quite a testimony from him, and to have that experience with your son. We were down here, and there was I'm going to be real transparent and vulnerable. There's a piece of us that felt so much guilt for leaving and not for staying to fight, not staying to be a voice. And my husband said, I would be there. I would be there. And I said, I would be there too, right? If we weren't here. And, over the last few years, we've seen people lose their jobs. We've seen police lose their jobs. We've seen healthcare workers lose their jobs. And that's still going on to this day. Like I was home a couple of weeks ago and we were talking about, well, we had family that were talking about how terrible the healthcare system is in BC, and I said, well, they're understaffed, and I said they still haven't hired back the people that they got rid of when they decided not to comply, and they're
Exactly.
all moving to Alberta. They're all leaving. They're leaving the country. They've found
Yep.
other jobs. They're doing other things because they had to. And no, 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 that's not happening anymore. COVID's over. And it's just like this dismissive, like that's why we didn't have bigger conversations with family and friends, is because
Yep.
it's just instantly dismissed that that's not actually happening, because the trauma is so real. And I really have compassion for that because I understand it. But I'll tell you, so what woke us up, which was really interesting, is my husband has always been a listener and watcher of alternative news. I am a worrier. So he's like, I'll watch for you and just give you the Coles notes so that you don't go down this rabbit hole and be worried about anything. But we have made some really good decisions in our life financially because he pays attention to these things. We've made some really good decisions, for our family because he pays attention to these things. And so it was 2019, right? In February of 2019, I was going to a work event in Anaheim. I was flying from Canada, from Vancouver Island to Anaheim, and I'm packing up all my stuff. And my husband comes into my office and he hands me a mask, and he goes, Christina, I've been listening to this stuff, and so like I'm being honest about all of this,
Oh
okay?
yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
be really transparent because we
Yeah.
didn't know what it
We
was at the
didn't know.
time.
Yep.
We didn't know. And by the way, I had the fear of God put in me. Like I was the person that left my groceries out on the porch for
Yep.
12 hours before I brought them in. Like I was that human, okay? But
Yep.
he goes here and he puts a mask in my purse, and I roll my eyes and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? This is absolutely ridiculous, Ryan. Like, no, this is so dumb. And so, but because I love him and I trust him, I put the mask in my purse. And so I go off to this event on a Thursday. Sunday morning rolls around. It's Super Bowl Sunday. I'll never forget. And he
Wow.
calls me. He's like, what time does your flight leave? That's the first question out of his mouth. What time does your flight leave? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, like 1. And he's like, you need to get home now. And I was like, what's going on? And he's like, that virus that I told you about, that virus that's coming out of China, that virus. He's like, they're quarantining planes in the States. There's 6 airports in the States, and LAX is one of them. They're quarantining all flights coming in from China starting today. You need to get the hell out of there. And I was like, what in the world is happening? And I have goosebumps telling you this story because I had this like wash go over me, and I was like, what is going on? What is happening? And so, I put my mask on, I went on the plane, I went home, and I was like, this is really weird. And so we started listening to Dr. Chris Martenson. And so I don't know if you know who he is, but he has this ability. He's an economist, but he also has a background in virology, and he was talking about COVID, and he was taking data from all over the world, and he was bringing it together and putting it on charts and making it simplified for people like us that don't have a background in all of that, and making it make sense. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense that we are shutting down the whole world for people that are not dying. Like they're not, less than 1%, right? And he started showing different studies, and there were people that had morbidity. I can't say it right now.
Morbidities.
Code morbidities. There
You
we
got
go.
it. You got it.
Code morbidities, right? They were people that were already sick. They were people that were in their 80s plus, right? But they were locking us down for something that didn't seem to be that serious. And he also came to what also came to light as we continued to watch Chris Martenson and we continued to watch this all unfold, is that other areas of the world were using different vitamins. They were using ivermectin. Oh man, I'm going to be fact checked today, right? They were using all of these things to treat. Yet it started being banned in Canada. The things that could actually help you, the vitamins, were being banned in the US. And the reason why is because as soon as you prorogue the Emergency Act, you cannot have another medication, right, that has been approved. You cannot have an emergency vaccine approved if you have another alternative, one that is tried, tested, and true, like ivermectin. And by the way, we were made fun of this horse medication. What do you mean you guys are talking about ivermectin? What do you like? That's a horse pill. That's a horse drug. And it's like, no, actually, it won the Nobel Peace Prize because it cured river blindness, and because it actually is a drug that doesn't have that many side effects. A very cheap drug, by the way, that nobody's going to make money off of, right? But will do something. And so that was actually one of the reasons that we decided to come to Mexico, is because I can go to the drugstore and buy it today if I want to, right? I can buy hydroxychloroquine. I can buy all these things, right? And so I was just like, what in the world is going on? And so do you want to, I know you laughed at my mask story, but do you want to tell yours?
Sure. Yeah, no, we I guess it would have been maybe June 2020. Costco was one of the first stores around us. They weren't forcing them. They were recommended. And, I'm not the guy to kind of follow the leader. I just never have been. But there's more masks showing up, and my wife's, maybe we should put one on. Maybe we should put one on. So the one day we did put one on, and I needed to, I put it on, and within 2 to 5 minutes, my eyes were watering and I was gagging. No joke. So she's going, take that off. I tried to do it one other time, and it was the same thing. And then she's like, just take it off. Like, just, I'll wear it. You don't. Like, we kind of knew. I did have a pretty serious neck surgery about 13 years ago. So I have a feeling that's why. I have some hardware in my neck. I have a feeling that's why. So when they were just recommended, and no other stores were doing it at the time. So I knew immediately early on, I can't do it. Oh, well, I can't do it. So no big deal. And then they came with, now you have to wear it. And I went, well, I can't. So I already knew that I couldn't. I didn't have to go in. I did talk to a doctor about it, but I didn't need to do that at the time, because I had legitimately learned that I can't wear one. Like, I just couldn't. So, but then, cops basically cops, not cops, but, when they had that security guard standing at the door asking you, I just came up with a system right away, because I'm kind of the guy that does most of the in-person shopping. And, I learned what's exemption. What is it? You just say to them, I have an exemption, but thank you. And the key is smile and don't stop. That's it. If they want to grab you, grab you. But I never had anyone grab me. There's a couple times where I thought at Costco it was going to happen, but they didn't. And that's kind of why I started, because I had a few incidents early on. That's why I started actually turning on my camera and taking it in with me, because I just had a feeling something's going to happen. I had multiple customers that came up and got in my face behind their mask, telling me I needed to wear a mask, and being, slightly aggressive. I just want to be left alone to buy my groceries. So I started videoing myself back then for my own protection. That way, if something did happen, and I would just delete it after. I would just delete it off my phone after. It's no big deal. You just kind of hold it in your hand like this. It's pointing at my face. It can pick up what's going on around me. And if someone does bump or grab me, it's going to be obvious in the video. So that's what kind of spawned into the video that you and your husband ended up seeing last week. I've gotten a little better at it, and much more like, I can be pretty reserved when I know there's a camera running and I know they're being dumb, like talking dumb. It's pretty easy for me to, stay chill, and it's not. Sometimes it's not. I've had a couple where it's not, but it's usually pretty easy to kind of hold it together, so to speak. But yeah, that's my introduction to masks.
It's not a strong argument, especially, even Fauci came out and said that masks were not effective. And then we go back and you have to wear masks. And now the CDC says they're not effective. And now you have to wear them again. Now it's coming around the corner again. They've started doing it in California, right? And so I was sick for a really long time. I had stomach issues for a really long time, and we couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I kept going to the medical system. I kept asking, and they kept prescribing different medication. And I was like, but look at the side effects of this medication. Like, it's nothing compared to what I would actually have to deal with. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And finally, I ended up paying to go see a specialist so that I could figure out that I had a gluten sensitivity, which is something that is very, very common because of our foods, because, of how they're processed and all that kind of stuff. I was actually misdiagnosed with celiac disease, and now I know that it was just a sensitivity. But I realized very early on that you had to be an advocate for your own health, right? Like going to see a doctor, we trust these people. We blindly trust these people with our health, but yet they get paid to prescribe. They get paid to do what, to recommend things.
Yep.
And I was like, this is not the route that I want to go to. I actually want to figure out the root of the problem so I can solve it and not have to take all these medications, not have, not be part of the system and spend all this money, which I understand it's a money business, right? But it just kind of started to make sense. And then the other piece of it was my daughter started going to kindergarten. She in 2020, she started
Wow.
going to and I was just like, oh man, this is a piece. And so she went to kindergarten. She decided that we asked her that she wanted to go to a French immersion school. She wanted to learn another language. So there's no surprise why we're here in Mexico. She's learning Spanish, right?
Mhm.
And so she goes to school, and now they have to wear masks, right? So now how is she supposed to learn a language while she's wearing a mask? And there's other kids, and she's a happy-go-lucky kid. She makes friends with everybody, right? And as time went on, we started looking into what does the Emergency Act actually mean? What are the things that they're allowed to do? Well, they can take your land, they can take your kids, they can take your agriculture, they can forcibly vaccinate. And then I started looking into it, and they had removed the age of consent. They'd removed the age of consent for medical procedures. And so now, if I sent my daughter to school, I automatically consent to the school being the authority on my daughter's health.
Unbelievable.
And I
Unbelievable.
was like, what in the world is happening right now? There is no way that that is okay. When did a school become the authority in health? Like, this doesn't even make sense. And like, what about the kids? Like, maybe they have an allergy, maybe they have
Exactly.
medicine that interacts. Like, all of these things, we can't blanket statement this stuff. And so I was like, this is not okay. And so I went to talk to her teacher one day. And I said, "Look, I don't want my kid wearing a mask. She's having a hard time. She's 5, right? Like she's like playing with it, and like now her hands are in her face, and like, isn't that worse? And she goes, "Oh, you're one of them." And I go, "Yeah, I'm one of them, okay? And I'm
Proudly.
gonna be a huge pain in your ass if you don't listen, okay?"
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and and it only took me 2 months. She was in school till October, and we said, "We're not doing this anymore." And most people think, especially now with Soji being, the thing that people are discussing, the thing that are making us fight, because by the way, before it was Soji, it was women's rights. Then it was Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Then it was Asian Lives Matter. Then it was the vaccine versus the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. Now it's just trans, this is the
Yep.
whole situation. It is all meant to divide us. It is
Yep.
all a
Yep.
freaking distraction. That's all
Yep.
it is. And I remember going to a friend of mine who, beautiful Black woman who lives in just outside of Ottawa, and she's a friend of mine. I said, "You got to explain this BLM movement to me. You got to. I don't understand, because I grew up in a small town white community. I'm so ignorant, and I'm willing to admit that, but I'm willing to have a hard conversation so that I do understand." She goes, "Christina, it's all BS. It's all a distraction, all of it." And I was like, "Are you serious?" And she's somebody I highly respect, somebody that
Yeah.
I've had really great conversations with. And I was like, wow. And that woke me up to like, this is just the next thing. And so people assumed that when I pulled my daughter from school, it was because of Soji, because of what they're pushing through and taking over. And that wasn't the truth. The truth was two things. Well, and by the way, Terry Fox has since been removed, right? Like, we're not
Oh,
celebrating Terry Fox anymore, right? And so the first thing was she came home in kindergarten, right? And I'm all about teaching history. I'm all about not repeating bad mistakes. I'm all about understanding where we came from. But she came home one day at 5, and she goes, "Mom, who do we know that's died from cancer?" And I was like, "What?" Like, at 5 years old. And I was like, "That's a harsh question. Like, why are you, honey,
with
why are you asking?" Right? Like, get curious
yeah.
about these things instead of getting upset about them, right? And so she said, "Well, we learned about Terry Fox today, and we learned that cancer kills you." And I said, "Well, first of all, some cancers can kill you. And yes, I've known people who have died, but not all cancers will kill you. And there are things that we can do to prevent that. There are things that we can eat healthy, we can get exercise, we can do whatever we can, right? So I'm going to educate her on what actually matters. And that I cannot believe that that was the focus of Terry Fox, right? For all the good that he did in the world, he died of cancer for her. That's the message she got at 5. Okay, so a couple of weeks later, Truth and Reconciliation Day comes around, and we all know that Trudeau went surfing into Tofino the first year on that, right? And so he just took that as a holiday instead of honoring what it truly was meant to be, which now makes me realize that it's complete propaganda. But she came home from that day. I went to pick her up at school, and she was visibly upset. Usually she wanted to play outside with the kids after school. She wanted to play in the playground. She was visibly upset. And I said, "What happened today?" And she wouldn't answer. And so she got in the Jeep, she got in the back of the car, and I turned around and I said, "What happened today? Tell me what happened today." And she said, "Mom, did you know that there were kids that were taken from school and they were never returned to their parents? They never got to see their parents again." And I was heartbroken. And I said, "What happened?" She said, "We had a lady come and she spoke to the entire school," right? So not just kindergarten. She didn't come in and speak to the kindergarten class. She spoke to everybody, but it's not age appropriate. My daughter doesn't have the discernment to understand what actually happened. But this
Absolutely.
woman was obviously in trauma. She cried. She talked about being taken. She talked about what her life was, how terrible it was, which, by the way, is horrific. I do not agree with what happened back then. I think that people do the best with what they got, and maybe some people thought it was a good idea or it was a bad idea and they rolled through it. I hope we never have to experience that again.
Mhm.
But the way that it was brought across to her, she was so scared to go back to school that it took me 2 weeks to convince her that she was safe at school at 5 years old,
Wow.
right? And so you start to think, if you're somebody that is a critical thinker, if you're somebody that starts to dig into stuff and research stuff, right? Can't tell you how many times I was told to trust the science and like trust the professionals, right? And if you're somebody that actually digs into those things, you start to connect the dots. You start to realize, hey, it's not just this, it's not just that, it's all of this
100%.
collectively that is going on, right? And so, like, tell me a little bit about like how that affected you. I was an entrepreneur. I worked for myself. I
Right.
work from home. We had some freedom, but like, how did that affect you with your job as a realtor?
Yeah, it was with the job thing. It was kind of interesting because we have a realtor database that we log into. I was hyper alert to just about everything because we're making a different decision and everybody's kind of coming after us. It seems like so. I want to make sure I'm making the right decision for my family without too much outside influence. Yeah, when I log into my realtor database, like I'm sure most people can equate this to something they have with work. It's they give you a couple messages that pop up immediately. So we're in that app multiple times a day, usually. And I saw one that popped up when vaccinations were out, and it said, like the bubble said, question: Can a homeowner only allow vaccinated people in their house? This is from our real estate board. They're trying to give us a fake case study, a fake scenario to sway public. It's pure propaganda. Can a homeowner do that? And then it says answer, yes, because there's another option, which is looking at the pictures or looking at the virtual tour. They can say this, and it's allowed. Well, anyone who has the real estate license knows that the number one way to sell a house is you want the most people through it in the shortest amount of time. That's, you're not going to want to reject potential showings and potential buyers and put a block on that. So that was, thankfully it never came up, but they were starting to, because we're sole proprietors. I do work for
Yep.
a brokerage, but I'm a sole proprietor, so I'm self-employed, and it'd be very difficult for them to push that on us. I heard some offices were really terrible with the push, but it's the same as any other part of society. I do want to jump back to something that actually, you know what? I'll go back to that later. But yeah, it was
You
just
go ahead. You do what you want to do. Okay, we're in it together.
It was just such a crazy, just about the you said the Truth and Reconciliation Day. I didn't want to interrupt, but I've got a theory on that. when that first came out with the, obviously we all care about all children,
Yes.
but when that first came out, and it was kind of a low spot because I think we had just come through our first winter. I think it was the winter of, 2021. We had just kind of come through that. And, you're kind of thinking, the spring, you get that spring feel and that happy kind of feel. And then the government released all those residential schools where they had supposedly found all these bodies. And it honestly, I fell for it at first because I was just grossed out, mortified, embarrassed at my country. Thank God I have a pretty good ability to try to figure out where those emotions are coming from. And I thought to myself, like, is this legit? And I started to kind of look inside, and Canada Day was coming up. And Canada Day is always a pretty good, bring people together, wear some clothes. We always go to the local parades. We always have for years, take our kids and really enjoy it. I was grossed out. I didn't want to do Canada Day that year. But thankfully, I realized that I think that's what the government was doing with that. They wanted to just keep another thumb on our necks and keep us with our heads down, not, in that kind of fear state where you're not, your discernment's out the window for most people, and you're just kind of easier to control. Thankfully now they still haven't found a body yet. I know a lot of that stuff went on and it was terrible, but I'm still waiting. They're starting to dig. They haven't found anything. So that's our government. That's another example. So all those orange flags that you saw that say, all children's life, I forget what it even was.
All children matter. All children
matter. There you go. Even that, like I think all children matter too, but there's not one body that's been found that spawned that movement. Not one. They haven't dug up one. They've dug in Manitoba. They've dug in other spots. So I have to say, I think it's just another propaganda piece for us, unfortunately.
Well, and here's the thing. People are going to say you're a conspiracy theorist. They're going to call you that because it's the easiest insult for them to discredit what you're saying and not have the tenacity or the discipline or discernment to go do the research themselves, right? They'd rather just say you're a conspiracy theorist and discount what you say completely. And it's really interesting. I think different things, like, look, I know that it's not our job to wake people up to this. I know that people are going to come to their conclusions on their own, and there'll be certain things in their lives that all of a sudden, like, a light bulb will go off, and our job is to give people grace and be there and support them along the way. Like, I truly believe that, and to hold our peace in the middle, not to fight people on what their opinions are, not to fight people on what we think is right, because we all have a right to our own opinion and to live, freely. Freely is really what it comes down to, living freely and not having somebody tell you that you have to do something that you don't believe in. And it was really interesting because my hometown, Powell River, is under interesting scrutiny by the Coast Salish tribe, because Powell was a supporter of the residential school. And so now they're trying to absolutely change the name of the entire town because they don't want that history there. But I'm like, if we start erasing history, if we start taking down statues, if we start doing those things, do you understand what that means and what's happened in history when we start doing those things? Right. And like, there's a huge danger to doing that. And you talk a little bit about what you noticed when you didn't wear a mask, or what you noticed when what happened when you started speaking out against these things, right?
Yeah, that was a real evolution for me. It felt like in the beginning, I told you how it started, and then I just knew I couldn't. So going through the stores and just watching everybody just with their heads down, shoulders slumped, was like men. I'll call out the men here, and nothing personal. We all have reasons to do the decisions we made. But whenever I would, go into these stores, I always forced myself to, put my shoulders back, put my chin up, and try to put a positive look on my face, even though it was like, So, and I did, by this time I was probably running my camera just for protection, as I mentioned. But I'd be going through stores and men would go, they'd be looking down. And then as soon as we would make eye contact, and they have a mask on and I don't, and I would put like a positive look on my face, they would immediately, eyes would just avert down to the ground. Like, I know their balls were going up in their stomach. Sorry to say that, but that's how it felt. It felt like it was just, I wasn't trying to be mean. I was trying to show them there's a different way.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's positive. So once that went on for a while, I said to my wife, I said, you know what, because I am kind of outspoken, I'm like, I'm going to see, I started making it a game to try and get a mask off people in the store. And I would just start by saying to, you pick someone, you literally pick someone. And I would say, okay, you go shop. I'm going to go see how many masks I can get off, because I truly think the masks are the tip of the spear for the other side. I absolutely do.
The virtue signal.
They virtue signal. They worm their way into your life, into your routine. For women, it becomes an accessory. Guys too, probably. But it just, where's your wallet, keys, phone, mask? It just becomes part of you before you know it. And so I was really, really pushing back against that. And, I would just start by going up to some stranger and I would just say, so do you love wearing that thing? And like, there's only one answer. I don't care how much you love wearing the mask. You can't say yes to that. You can't. So I would get a no, of course not. And then when I would get that, I go, well, then why are you wearing it? Well, we're supposed to. And then I would say, well, all I say is I have an exemption, but thank you. And I keep walking. That's it. And they can't even ask about your exemption. It's a crime. It's a privacy. They can't even ask. So, that's all you have to do. Really? So my wife, if she was here, she'd vouch for me on how many I got off people, strangers. It was just an absolute joy. Had some shirts printed that said "done listening" on them. They became kind of my superhero costume. I swear, it sounds weird, but when you're going into these stores, as interesting as it is to look back on this, it really is difficult. It really is difficult to be the one swimming upstream, going against. It's that's why there's, I'm sure Matthias Desmet, his mass formation psychosis. It's not him. It's a previous theory, but he's the one who kind of put it back in the limelight during this period. And basically, you've got 10 to 15% of people that will never, ever, ever wake up. No matter what you do, no matter what you tell them, they will never wake up. They will die to protect the narrative. And then you've got 50 to 60% in the middle, and they're the masses. They're the ones who just, well, it's just easier to wear a mask. I don't want to fight about it,
Yeah.
And then there's the 10 to 15% on the other end, maybe 20 on the top end. That's me. And we just, no matter what, we just won't succumb to this. Some people have become this. Some people are from the start. We've all got a different sort of awakening story, as you mentioned with yours. But that, once I had that breakdown from him and I bought his book and I listened to his book on an ebook, it really made those conversations so easy for me, because as soon as I would realize that someone was in the bottom percent, I would just say, have a nice day. That was it. I didn't even need to continue it, because I knew they weren't. And it was very easy to recognize them. And then if I had someone that's in the middle where they can be swayed, then I would maybe spend a little bit of time with them and try to go that route. And then if you meet the odd unmasked person in a store, I would just make a beeline right for them, because where we were, like, I would say over that period of time when masks were forced, I would say less than 1% of people, like, I would say probably 1 out of every 10 stores I went in, I might see someone that was unmasked, like and I don't go in 10 stores a day, right? So that was, it might be a week and I don't see anyone with, like, I'm the only one. And that weighs on you, even though you feel like you're doing the right thing. And it felt like I was going through the stores and looking at everybody else, and they were playing a game that I wasn't. That's how it felt.
Yeah.
It felt like I don't want to sound arrogant, but it honestly felt, watching everybody heads down, doing the zombie shuffle, it felt like I had evolved and they were behind. It really did. I felt like a different species.
Yeah,
You're just like,
it's so interesting.
it's
That's
just
exactly how
crazy,
you say it. It's
you
like being
know?
on a different parallel. It's like not even noticing. It's just like you're somewhere in a different world almost,
Yeah.
And it was, I love that shirt, "Done listening," and it's so interesting because as soon as they started talking about masks again, my whole Facebook feed filled up with "Do not comply." Right? Do not comply. And I was like, but by
Excellent.
saying do not comply, you're implying that this is something that is legal that you have to do, but
Good
also that you
point.
have an authority over your free will
Good
and your
point.
free choice, right? And
Good
so
point.
we all have a choice in this. And I'm not saying that it was easy, right? Like a mandate, by the way, isn't the law. It's not a
Mhm.
legal law. And by the way, we talked a little bit about that. We can talk about that. There's some court
Yeah.
cases that are going on right now that get thrown out at the end, like just to tie people up with money and time and all this BS, right?
Exactly.
But like how you're treated, and I understand why people want to forget about it. I understand why people say COVID is over. We're not talking about it anymore. It's not happening. I get that maybe they don't feel good about the decisions that they made or how they treated people, but like we were in a position where we were uninvited to certain things. We couldn't go to our favorite restaurants. We couldn't do everyday
Yeah.
activities with our daughter that like
Yeah.
took away from her joy and her life. And that's part of the reason that we moved is like she deserves to be a child. She deserves to be a kid. She does not deserve to be a political pawn. And then I had, all those people come back and say, well, you're making her one because she's not wearing a mask. And I'm just like, are
Man.
you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? Like, if you want to see what women are capable of, threaten their kids.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
all you got to do. And, and it happened through our family, that we went to a big family wedding. And then after that, we got a group in a group family text. One of the siblings said, we're no longer hanging out with you donkeys who refuse to get vaccinated, who refuse to keep you, you're putting all of us at
Oh
risk because of it,
my
right?
God.
Or, and by the way, I want to be like very compassionate and understanding, because, even with my sister, she was having a baby, and you know how when I'm pregnant right now, I'm very
Yeah.
protective of my body and people
Yes.
around me. And so she was so scared. The fear of God was put in her because of media, because of what everybody else was doing,
Yeah.
that mass psychosis, right? And she didn't want me to see her kid. Like she
Yeah.
didn't want me to see her
Yeah.
kids. And I was just like, I'm heartbroken by these things, but I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to fight her on it. I
Yeah.
respect her for having that protection over her kids. But
Yeah.
then it goes on to, well, telling my dad, if you don't get vaccinated, you're not allowed to see my kids. And it's just like, do you see what is happening here? Do you understand what is happening here? We are dividing families. We are hurting people, right? Some of
Mhm.
my friends put on events, only vaccinated allowed. You couldn't show a negative test. You couldn't anything, but only vaccinated are allowed. And it's just like, do you understand what you're doing? Do you understand what like
Can't
Nazi
believe it.
Germany looked like? Like, do you really get
Unbelievable.
what that history is repeating
Mhm.
themselves, or it's repeating itself right now? And it's like, we get that you want to forgive and forget, and you want us to forgive and forget and to move
Yeah.
forward, but we can't forget. We love, and I still have so much compassion and love for my family and my friends, and I have understanding and acceptance for those things. I never fought them on it, but
Yeah.
man, it was so painful. That lesson
Good
is
for
not
you.
going to go unlearned,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
we're still, and like, let's talk about this because people think COVID is over. They think it's all
Mhm.
over, right? And so it's
Yeah.
not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? I have actually, you might know a pretty famous nurse in Ontario here. She's from our hometown here, or my hometown here, London, Kristen Nagel. She's been kind of,
I know her name.
yeah, know of her, whatever. Yeah. She's friends with her a little bit, especially the last little while. And she told me last week. So this story is 7 days old. She told me that a week before, so 2 weeks ago, a friend of hers, obviously she knows a lot of nurses. This is in September 2023. This is September 2023. Her friend came back from an 18-month mat leave, stretched it out. You can stretch it out with the same pay that you get in a year to probably to try and avoid some of this garbage.
Sure.
Goes to come back to work. See you later. Got her walking papers as soon as she came back because she did not take the jab. She has an 18-month-old baby. She was like September. So, it's at the point where they're kind of down with the ship. You know, they're so committed. They've this has become their identity, probably like it's become mine as well. I'm not,
Mhm.
you know, and talking to people that have, like you mentioned a couple of them that, oh, it's over, it's over. I have some very close family members that are extremely close before COVID, and I have a lot of trouble like looking at them. I still love them. I know it's the propaganda, the compassion. I love what you said there. You don't even really blame them. And that's a great point. Like,
No.
remember that this propaganda, we were supposed to fall for it. This has been a long-term thing. This was not just a 2 week to flatten the curve. That was just the initial break the seal on the tyranny kind of thing. So I get people that have fallen for it. And then you roll back to Matthias Desmet again, 15%, 60%, 15%. And there's some people that will just not wake up. And I'm at peace now that it's okay. Even though I want to save everybody, I'm at peace that I can't help them. Just a very quick story. There's a lady that I spoke with. I was paying at Costco. It's actually a post on my Instagram feed. It's buried in there somewhere. And this lady, there was no more mask mandates. And the lines at Costco. There's one, and then there's another one a little ways over. She's at the next one. She's got latex gloves. She's got double mask. She's got face shield, and she's probably 65. And she started a conversation with me, not knowing where it would go. And I quickly, kind of flipped my phone open and recorded. Long and short of it, she tells me that I said to her, she goes, I would have as many shots as they tell me to get. I would have it. And I said, oh, ma'am, like just genuine compassion for this. Oh, ma'am, I've read a whole bunch of this stuff. And my family right here, we've had 0 shots. That's not a 666 for anybody that's into that stuff. I said, my family has had 0 shots. And we've been in all the stores. I told her I've been mask free. I didn't die last winter. I'm still here. I haven't got sick. I'm breathing the same air as everybody else. And I felt like I was almost getting to her, even through her like 9 layers of PPE. And she said to me, and this is, like I said, this is on my Instagram somewhere. And she goes, it's almost like a cult, isn't it? That's what she said to me. Because I had asked her, so ma'am, like if it was summertime, I said, if they're to tell you you need another shot in September, because she said she'd get whatever shots they told her. If they told you need another shot in September, would you get it? And she's like, yep. And I said, okay, and what if they tell you then in March you need another one? She's like, yep. And I said, and then May. I just kept going because she's like, yep. I didn't know the Matthias Desmet stuff at that point. And, obviously she's in the bottom. But she's never waking up. She can't be helped. You can't help everybody. I hate to say it like that. I want to, I really do. But
I know.
You can't. You just can't.
And it comes from this, I do believe it comes from a place of care, right? It comes from a place of like, we care about the people around us, right? It was like, get the shot to protect your grandma. My grandma even said to me, she's like, so am I just never going to see you again? And I said, well, I guess that's up to you, but why would you not see me if I wasn't healthy? And I'm so grateful, by the way, like, even though that we were kind of the black sheep, I'm so grateful that, my parents have come around and said, we're not ever getting another one of those. We're not doing this again. But it's still, you can't take that back. You can't take back those decisions. And that's the hard piece, and here's the other piece. I saw, I shared this comment that came up, and it said, missed out on the birth of my first grandchild because I'm not vaccinated and I wasn't allowed in the hospital. I had a very good friend of mine who had a mother who was in palliative care and was passing away, and she was not allowed to see her unless she did this. Like, they have you by the throat. You have, is your mother going to die by herself, or are you going to go get this? And so she went and got it, had a terrible adverse reaction, right? Had a terrible adverse reaction to the second one and was like sick for months, right? And then, a friend of mine who's quite young, she's in her in her late 20s. She worked for a cable company. She's customer service, works from home, must get vaccinated. Okay.
Mhm.
And so she's like, but I work from home. I'm not even in the public. I have to. Well, she got a really, she ended up in the hospital with the first one. The second one put her into what they've diagnosed her with. She's got 6 doctors. She takes about 40 pills a day.
Oh,
Lupus induced or vaccine induced lupus is what
mm,
they've diagnosed her with. And it's just like, you force these people to go do this to keep their jobs, to keep their livelihood, to keep their payments coming in so they can pay their bills. Like, this is not right. And that's where I got upset, because I saw people get hurt, right? I saw people get taken advantage of and get hurt. And although that wasn't really common, right? But the more you start to talk to people, there were these adverse effects that were
absolutely.
happening, right? And so it's interesting because people have asked me, and they're quite surprised. They're like, "Are you gonna have the baby in Mexico?" Right? And they're quite surprised when I said, "Yes, yes, I'm having the baby in Mexico." For our family of 3, and then we'll have a baby, for the year, including pregnancy, is $5,000 US to have international health care. Okay? It's only 2,500 if you don't have a baby, but I wanted to have my baby here, and I'll tell you why. When we were going through all of this in 2021 before we moved, I had 2 miscarriages. The first question that they asked when I called the doctor's office was, "Are you vaccinated?" Well, yeah, I've got all my vaccines. I actually have travel vaccines. I have all of these things. Well, are you vaccinated with a COVID vaccine? And I said, "No, because I'm trying to get pregnant. We don't, emergency release. We don't have any long-term studies. Does this affect fertility? They're saying it's safe for pregnant and breastfeeding women, but I've been in the health space for 8 years. I've advocated for my own health. You're not even allowed to recommend vitamin C or a multivitamin to pregnant women. And
Yeah,
so all of a sudden you are recommending like this. It's a disconnect. Like that doesn't even seem real. And so as soon as they found out that I wasn't vaccinated, I was not allowed to come into the office. I wasn't allowed to come into the midwife office. I was like, that's really interesting. I think at least alternative medicine would have it
mm,
together. And so they sent me for a blood test. And by the way, this was a doctor that had replaced my previous GP because he'd gone back to Europe and got sick and tired of this system. So it was just a guy that I'd never met on the phone saying, "Yeah, I'm going to send you for some blood work." I'm like, "Okay, great." So I go for the blood work. I call him up. I said, "Hey, what does it say?" He said, I think you're pregnant. It's not really my area of expertise, so I'm going to recommend you to somebody else. And so I started looking around, and you don't get a one-on-one doctor anymore. You get a collective,
mhm.
right? Because there's
Yeah,
not enough doctors, so you get a collective. And I was part of this group on Facebook that were like-minded mamas, people that were like me, that were just a little bit apprehensive, that were totally shunned for asking questions. And God bless my mom. I love her to death, and I know she said this out of concern, but she's like, "Are you doing this, because you actually believe that the vaccine is bad, or are you doing this just to be difficult?" Right? Just to go to, like just to, I'm like,
both.
not go eat my favorite restaurant, not being able to be included, to be totally
Yeah,
ostracized. Yeah, no, I'm doing it just to be a pain in
yeah.
the ass. But at the time I understand where she came from. And I said to her, as concerned as you are for me not doing this, I'm just as concerned for you for doing it. Okay. And I
Great
believe
answer.
everybody has a choice. Everybody has free will. Everybody gets to go and decide for them. If they feel better, if that woman that would keep getting them every 6 months and that
Yeah.
made her feel
Hey,
safe and good, hey man, good for you. High
power
five.
to
I'm
you.
super happy that you feel great and amazing. And I'm, like, all the power to you. Absolutely. But what I started seeing and what people were doing were sharing screenshots of nurses that were in the local hospitals in my area, in Victoria, Nanaimo, Cowichan Valley. And the screenshots were, anybody unvaccinated should just be left out to die. We shouldn't have to treat them. I was like, this is like the worst side of humanity I've ever seen, right? And so I
100%.
started to become, and like, it wasn't just one, there were multiple text messages from nurses going back and forth saying, we shouldn't have to treat them. They shouldn't be allowed in the hospital. These people are not, they're putting everybody at risk. How dare them? They're awful. They're terrible. They're, what did Trudeau say? Misogynistic,
Yep.
racist, right?
Yep.
They're,
Yep.
they're the scum
Exactly.
of the earth,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I was like, I looked at my husband and I said, as somebody in this country who is like a top 2% earner, how did I become a second class citizen overnight? How did this happen? And I was actually fearful that if I did have a baby in Canada, that I would not be able to go into the hospital. And although that may sound crazy to those of you that are listening right now, that fear, there are lawsuits going on right now. And there's a woman, and I'll speak to the specific lawsuit, that she was not, because she was unvaccinated, she was not allowed into the hospital. She had her baby in the ambulance bay of emergency,
Mhm.
and her husband had to wait in the parking lot. I
Wow.
did not want that. I did not want that. I did
Yeah,
not want to be discriminated against. And I think that
100%.
so often people just kind of like assume all of these other things. Like one of the criticisms I got the other day talking about the Canadian healthcare system, this guy, his comment was, "Oh, I'm guessing you're an anti-vaxxer, COVID denier, and convoy supporter." And I said, "And
Uh,
I'm just guessing, you're somebody that wears a mask outside and by yourself in your car, right? Like, I'm
exactly.
just, and he's like,
Terrible.
no, just when we use common sense. And I said, isn't that right? When we use common sense, when we care commonly about everybody else around us, we love, we respect, we have compassion, we
Mhm.
show that to other people. I think that that's what really comes down to. And we've absolutely destroyed our medical system by kicking good people out of it because they didn't comply with something.
100%. 100%. It's still ongoing. As I just gave you an example, I'd love to let it go. I'd love to just turn the page. I'd love
Yes.
to, but like all those things, when you see one of those old videos of the news, just every single clip, you're taking up space. You're the Toronto Star, I think it was, that had the "What do we even do with these people?" Like that actually is a crime in the criminal code to take a
These
minority. And
people.
yeah, like it was unreal, and we're just supposed to pretend it never happened and go about our day, and just get back to work. Don't worry. And when we do it to you next time, just you because that's like, as you said, that's what's going to happen. It's going to come back, and probably worse when it does, if the people don't flip the
Yeah.
table. We
If they
have
don't pay attention.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about discriminating against a minority, and that that's something that is loud right now with soji and transgender and all these things,
Yep.
right? But we've been giving power to this minority. And by the way, I'm not I'm not saying they're a minority to be disrespectful. They are a minority in society, right? But we've been giving this power away, and the same thing that happened with Truth and Reconciliation Day. It caused more division. It causes more division. The labeling, all those things, it causes more division. And what happens in history? Divide and conquer. Divide and
Yep.
conquer. And that's happening right now. And so this is, one of the things that I wanted to put. I see another comment here. People still can't get life-saving organ transplants in Australia and Canada, by the way. If they're unjabbed, they get taken off the list. Although you can go donate blood and nobody will ask you if you're
Yeah.
jabbed or
Yeah.
unjabbed, right? But people are still being discriminated against. And by the way, when you went to a doctor beforehand, kids, parents that chose not to vaccinate their kids like from birth, right? They still get to go to a doctor's office.
Hmm.
Doctors still treat people with AIDS, with tuberculosis, with Ebola in
Bingo.
some countries. They get treated everywhere, but all of a sudden, you're not going to allow this for people that haven't complied to what you want them to do. Like, it's not about what people think it's about. It's about dividing people. It's about bringing chaos. It's about the propaganda that's being forced upon people to create fear. And you're right. You know what? It's still happening today. It's happening. People still don't have their jobs back. I have a friend down here in Cabo who was a surgeon in Canmore, Alberta,
Oh wow.
and he was a surgeon for 20 years, and he got COVID. He got over it. Right. I also made sure that when I got over COVID, I said I recovered. I didn't die. Right. And so he got over it. And not to say that people didn't. I don't want to be disrespectful because I understand that some people did. I absolutely, and I have
Mhm.
so much compassion for that. But he got over it. Okay. He's got immunity. He's a doctor. He's like, I have immunity to this now. I have antibodies. And so he had to go to the highest level of government in health to say, I've got antibodies. I will test. I will whatever I have to do to come into my job. And they said, no, if you don't get jabbed, you lose your job. You lose your license.
Unreal.
And he's
Yeah.
like, and he lives here now, and he sailed a sailboat down here. He does sail tours. He like is living the high life now. It's like all good, right? But there's a lot of people. We just talked before we got on here. There's a lot of
Mhm.
people out there that are moving to other countries that are leaving because they don't want to live in this anymore. And those of us that have decided to do that, we're painted as crazy conspiracy theorists. But I was, in the grand scheme of things, I wasn't prepared, and maybe that was my motherly instinct at the time with my young daughter or wanting to have another child. I wasn't prepared to stick around and see what happened, right? Like that fuck around and find out. I
Yeah.
was not
Yep.
prepared to see how that, how that plays
Yep.
out.
Yep.
And so what are you seeing now? Are you starting to see people kind of say, yeah, I'm not going to go, I'm not going to go along with that anymore. I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm not, because I'm in Mexico. Nobody
Yep.
really listens down here
Beautiful.
anyways.
Beautiful.
Right? So it's like it's free, it's wonderful, it's the sun is shining all the time, but what's it like up there? Like, do you see people that are starting to say, "Yeah, we're not gonna do that again?"
There's kind of a, I would say initially I would answer that yes. There's a lot more people, and especially people that already made that decision, saying not getting any more, and done with that merry-go-round. But my wife, I don't have a Facebook account, but I had to delete
I
that
might not after this
early,
either. I might not after
early,
this either.
early in COVID. I had to delete it because it was just, I was just being, it needed to be gone. It was just a disease. So I shut it
Yeah,
down. But
yeah.
my wife said, when I've said to her that, I kind of what you just asked me, if more people are kind of saying, we're not doing that anymore. And I've sort of said those kind of things to her. And then she goes, well, let me just show you a Facebook app here. And she shows me some stuff on there, and then I go, oh my gosh, I'm very disappointed to see that people are like, there's that many people still on I guess the other side. But when you roll it back into, again, I always get my baseline back with Matthias Desmet. That could just be where the 15% are congregating. And the key is, like, that's a very important scientific study. I don't know if study's the right word, but that's been figured out. Like, that's proven. You know what I mean? It's not like it's not a theory. So you're going to have those percentages. It's now the government has been paying the bottom 15% and giving them a speakerphone and putting all their signs on every bus stop, every Facebook post, every Instagram, putting all those fact checks and all that stuff. But it's getting to the point where people are really, I think, seeing through it. Even though Canada is, and especially the city I'm in here, is a kind of a woke shithole. I hate to say it like that, but it really is. We've got Western Ontario University, we've got Fanshawe College, then we've got a lot of hospitals and a lot of senior citizens. And I don't know if you've had the same experience with speaking with people of that kind of my parents' generation. They had trouble seeing through it. They really did. I don't know if it's because they got the TV first. I was growing up outside in the 80s. I don't know why it is, but that generation is very, very difficult to get through. They need to be kind of slapped with it, and it is coming. A lot of them are waking up. Like, my parents are both in the same boat. They're done. They're not doing any of that ever again. They're adamant they're not doing it again, but don't want to talk about it. Don't want to talk about it. I'm like, I need my closure.
Well, yeah, and like some sort of validation, right? Some sort of validation. And I think that generation, I think the reason it was hard for them to see is because they've had a very easy life. They didn't go through the wars. They didn't go through really the depression. They didn't go
Good
through
point.
any of those things, right? And so you
Good
say like
point.
that quote, like, weak men create hard times create strong men create weak times, and then it goes in a big circle, right? And so I think that it was just because life has been so easy. And here's the thing, I watched the march yesterday, the march for parental rights. And look, they're putting people in positions that are so difficult because we're not allowed to have big conversations anymore. We're not allowed to say the things that are on our mind, or else we're labeled racist, hate speech, all this kind of stuff that comes off the top of people's heads, or rolls off the tongue so easily now to discredit your thought. And I've always thought, like, okay, so if you want me to accept your beliefs, which, by the way, we all get freedom of thought, freedom of speech, all that kind of stuff, but you want me to accept your beliefs, well, why won't you accept that I believe that men can't menstruate and can't have babies? Like, you don't have to hate me for it, right? You don't have to agree with me. I'm totally fine if you don't agree with me. That's totally fine, right? But now that's become hate speech. And that's where things get really, really interesting, right? When you
Mhm.
start to look at what's going on, when you start to look at a digital currency, possibly programmable coming down the line, when you start to look at other countries that are communist that have social credit systems and what people are allowed to do, in China right now, if you don't subscribe to digital ID, you can't buy groceries, right? And so, like, how far do we have to go down this hole to realize, hey, guess what? We're all on the same team. We are
Yeah,
all human beings hurling through space on a rock together. There's no point in fighting each other over this because we're all on the same team. If we can teach our kids love, compassion, respect for all, then that's the lesson. It's not this is how we need to be treated because we're different. When you start doing that, it's awful, and by the way, that credit was not given to the people that were unvaccinated. "We're different." "Oh, no, well, then
mhm,
you are a terrible human being," right? And, we could go into social engineering, we could go into all the things that
mhm.
happen behind the scenes to brainwash us that we don't even know that are happening.
Yep.
Again, people are gonna discredit me and say I'm a conspiracy theorist, but you know what I am? I'm a mom that loves my child, that wants her to have the best shot at life. I'm a wife that loves my husband, that wants to keep my family together, that think that as parents that we need to infuse our children with family values and a belief system where they get to make good decisions moving forward and they're good to all humans. They have a global perspective. They question everything. They problem solve. Like that's who I am. I have not a hateful bone in my body. I just get really upset when people are put in a position where they feel like they don't have a choice. And that's
Mhm.
where we're at. People feel like they can't have these conversations, Rob, because they're
Yep.
going to be ostracized, right? You said
Mhm.
in the beginning, people have told you, like, even my husband, I said today, I said, "Ugh, should I stream this on my Facebook page or should I like put it in my private group, right? Or should like where should I put this? Because
Uh,
this is me through and through, and I haven't really spoken out loud like this, um, or being inspired enough to do it, other than speaking with Kid Carson. I'm gonna
yeah.
meet with Kaylor Betts in October, and he's been really loud about some of this stuff. Louder than I have had the courage to be. That's for sure. But where does this end? When do we come together? When do we have a solution? Right?
Yeah, that's whew, there's the I need some time to think about that answer. No. Where does this end? You know, to a couple of options. It goes the way you're talking with the control keep coming in. Like it's, anyone that thinks we're in 2019 right now because there's no mandates or forced whatevers, like they're dreaming. They're in the bottom 15%. Whereas I think the masses are waking up, and whether they took the shots or not, they're waking up and they're realizing that okay, 2 weeks now we're going into year 4. Like, can we not can we not agree that there's a bit of a problem here, guys? It's
Yeah.
not that difficult. I understand, we've all made mistakes. We've all, done things we didn't, want to have happen, but we have to own these so that it doesn't happen again. Because as you mentioned, the statues, not to bounce around, but like that's how they make us more malleable, is by destroying our the roots of our society. Like even the Bud Light thing. Like the Bud Light
Ugh,
thing is oh great, yeah, they're taking it on the chin, but in the Communist Manifesto, that's one of the rules, is they want to destroy your traditions. They want to make you kind of blowing in the wind to be easier to be taken over. And Bud Light, like I don't drink Bud Light, I never have, but that's kind of a real American, North American,
yeah.
maybe, it's a guy thing on the golf course or whatever. It's kind of a big thing, and they've destroyed that brand. So anybody who was tied to that brand is now kind of blowing in the wind with it. And I don't think it's just about a boycott and getting them back with that. That just feeds into the whole thing, I believe personally. I'm not saying they shouldn't be boycotted, but I don't think that's an answer. I don't think that's the counter move. You know what I mean? I think it's way bigger than that. It's
Yeah.
way bigger than that. So where does it end? I hope it ends with the politicians who have done this owning it, owning their decisions. In Canada here, I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm a longtime conservative voter. I voted for them probably, I think I did the math, like 27 years since I was 18. Um, my dad was a business owner. I remember him battling the unions when I was a kid. I'm an only child. I remember that like starkly. That had a real impression on me as a kid. So obviously I'm not voting NDP, you know, they're the union guys and conservative is business. So, but then when during the whenever that was, you know, when Andrew Scheer was the leader of the federal party going against Trudeau, I plugged my nose and voted for him. I plugged my nose because I was starting to kind of see through this garbage, just why this vanilla. It's like they want to lose. And then the next guy, I didn't vote for him. And I said to myself then, and I've told lots of people, I will never vote for them again. Everyone's like, that's who you have to vote for now. I will never vote for them again unless they get on their knees and beg forgiveness in some form and admit that like all they did is sit on their hands and collect their paychecks while Canadians got rolled. And people will say, oh, you know, Pierre's the guy. Oh, I could just, even yesterday, he sent out an order to not let any of his MPs talk about the march. Like that went out yesterday. So, you know, free speech, you know, like that's what they did when Canadians got rolled. If he had stood up, Pierre has a strong voice. He could have had all my respect, just like Roman Baber does, who did that in the Ontario provincial government. He stood up in January 2021, started speaking out against it, started doing his speeches. He got kicked out of the party for it. You know, he was just amazing. You know, he would have, I actually ended up meeting with him in November 2021. I was at a bit of a low point then, just going, how long is this going to go on for? I'm a cement head. I'll keep banging it against the wall. But I needed something. So Roman Baber had been doing these long videos where he obviously is sitting with an epidemiologist or a vaccinologist and helping, like he can't write those speeches. So it was, and he just kept pushing the envelope as an independent politician. So I had reached out to him. I just called his office and I said, can I talk to his secretary? Can I just come down and meet with Roman for like 15 minutes? She's like, what? Do you live near here? I said, no, I'm just outside London. She goes, you're going to come all the way here to meet with him for 15 minutes? I said, yep, if he'll have me. Long story short, I did go down, met with him, sat with him for 90 minutes. He told me stuff from behind the scenes that absolutely appalling. And they knew it was a lie then. The risk was the big lie. The risk with them saying everybody needs to be locked down. Everybody needs to be, you know, jabbed and all this. They knew it wasn't. They knew it was in the seniors. They knew it was the comorbidities. They absolutely knew. And that's why Roman Baber, who has a conscience, had to leave, you know. So it's tough. I don't think voting gets us out of this. I really don't. The more I, you know, see what I've seen and the next gen, get the libs out. Like
it's not even about that, you know, and I'm so glad that you said that, because the good people do leave. They realize that their hands are tied and there's absolutely nothing that they can do. It's time to figure out a different way of doing business. It's time to figure out a different way of life. It's time to figure out different systems, whether it's our healthcare, education, our government. Like, we're waking up to all this. We're becoming conscious to all of this. It can't just be pushed through like it has been for the last 50 years. And I want to share this comment. I'm glad I'm self-employed for 30 years. And I know, you know, you said earlier that you were self-employed as a realtor. And I remember my husband was getting his real estate license and people would say to him, well, you have to get vaccinated if you want to go show houses. Like, you have to. And you know, for his health, you know, there were some things with his health that, you know, I still believe in medical privacy, so I'm not going to go into detail with, but that he wasn't sure if this was the right thing for him or if it would cause more problems down the line. And so, you know, when I talk about freedom, the reason that I pitch entrepreneurship and business is because really it's the only way to control your life. It's the only way to control your paycheck. It's the only way to control your life. Yes, it can be more difficult. And I think that people think that going into business for themselves is a risk. But after the last couple of years, you know, seeing Google and Amazon and Meta lay off hundreds of thousands of people that thought, you know, in the tech world thought that they would have jobs forever. You know, the real risk is not making decisions that are in alignment with your core values, your belief system, your purpose, and what you're truly gifted at. You know, we're all here for a reason. We're all here for a purpose. You know, I never thought my purpose would be bringing awareness to this kind of stuff or putting my neck on the line. You know, my husband said, "What hill are you willing to die on?" And I'm like, "The one that protects my family. That's the hill I'm willing to die on. The one that protects me and my family. The one that we make choices not based on fear, but based on control and victories of what we want in our lives. You know, a lot of people will be like, oh, you're such a coward, you left the country. No, we chose differently. We worked our asses off to be in a position where we had options. And when you have options, you have freedom, right? And you were able to continue working. You were able to continue to make a paycheck and take care of your family, because you work for yourself, because you were
Mhm.
able to control your livelihood. And you know what? I just think it's so great that you've had people around you support you in that way. I've seen a lot of people stand up and support others that are in this community, that we're feeling ostracized, that we're feeling taken advantage of, that we're really, I've seen people close their businesses. I had someone yesterday, because I'll tell you the story really quick.
Sure. Yeah.
Her daughter, her young daughter, was in a family change room at a complex, like at a arena where they have a pool and all that kind of stuff. And somebody, a transgender gentleman, I don't want to misgender, so transgender gentleman, female, was in there, right? And was looking under the change room, right? So she's like, this is absurd. We cannot allow people and I did see a march
Mm.
in the US of kids that walked out in their high school because they didn't want boys to be allowed to use the girls' change room. Like, is it going to be our fearless youth that like come and
Wow.
save us all? Like, what does it take? And as a parent, if you're not speaking out about this stuff, if you're not doing that, and you're not fighting for your kids, what are they going to get left with? What's the next generation going to get left with? And so this woman yesterday said, because she went to the march, and by the way, she was like, it was quite beautiful. There were people that had pride shirts on that were there because, I've got a friend that's a lesbian, and she's like, this is all bonkers. Like, she's like, I don't believe in any of this stuff. And she's like, furthermore, they've taken, what I believe in out of pride and made it this propaganda machine. But like, this woman is like, now terrified that she's going to lose her business and not have any support. And I said, I promise you, what you believe is true. And there are people around you that are going to support your business. They're going to support you just for being you. And you know what? That's the risk that we take, right? I understand that having this conversation, I could turn off a heck of a lot of people. I could, that they might not want to work with me. They might
Mhm.
not want to be around me. They might block me and unfollow me. And I could lose so much for having this conversation, but I'm willing to risk it all because I care for humanity. I care for the future of our kids. I care for the future of our country. I care for Canada. We've had this grieving process when we left because we're like, what is this country that we were supposed to be so proud of, that we were raised to be so proud of, this free
Mm.
country? What is happening?
Oh,
And
it
so
gets me right there, what you just said. Oh,
we're all fighting for the same thing, but we've been made to think that we're against each other, and it simply isn't the case, right? This isn't about hate. This isn't about discrimination. This is something so much bigger than us. And as soon as we realize that and bring people together, we can win this fight. We can win this battle. And I hate that it's a fight.
yeah.
I hate that there's division. I hate that it's them and us. I hate all of that, right? That's the hard part. But I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation, Rob. Thank you so much for how
Problem.
you show up on social media, for sharing the conversations, the funny conversations you're having
Yeah.
with doctors or people. When you walk into an office, I know that you were just discriminated against because you
Yeah.
have a mask exemption and people told you
Yeah.
to leave. They said, get
Yeah.
out of a medical office. And you're like,
Yeah.
but I have an exemption, right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
thank you
Yeah.
for fighting the good fight.
No problem. Yeah, that was just last week. Just last week, I was surprised. I've found the most incredible doctor who's a MD, but also a natural doctor on the side. He had quite a pretty amazing awakening story in the around 2007. But he starts and he just gives you a battery of tests. And I was just dropping off the results of those. That's his starting point. Not that there's anything wrong with me. And I walked in and I saw a mask, a pretty aggressive no mask, no entry sign. And I was kind of surprised. I poked my head in as I walked by and I see a bunch of like people just heads down, masks up to here. And I went, really? So I went and dropped my stuff off. And then I went, you know what? This ringing in my ear, this tinnitus, I'm going to get this looked at and see how they treat me. So I turned on my camera, walked in, and it was just like you said. Lady squawks through her mask about her. The thing is, the irony of the whole thing, how many shots has she had? Like, that's fine, take your shots, but are you that terrified? You're behind 2 layers of mask, there's glass there, you've got your 3 or 4 shots probably, and you're squawking at me to put on a mask to protect you. I just, like,
The
at some
cognitive
point,
dissonance.
yes, at some point, like, can you not understand how ridiculous all of that is? But yeah, it's I'm going to take that one actually to the Human Rights Tribunal. I really am. I've already been in touch with someone, and I'm going to push that as far as possible, because this time, if they're bringing it back, I was kind of on defense, but doing it offensively. This time, I'm on offense all the way through. I'm on offense all the way through. So I appreciate, you having me here, and maybe getting a few more people to, see the light, and even have a conversation about it, and just realize that because they put a mask on and kept their head down for 3 years, they don't have a clue what people that like myself went through. They don't have a clue.
Absolutely.
And they can easily say, oh, it'd be so easy. Why don't you just put on a mask? Why don't you, again, you just shot yourself in the foot. You don't get it. It's not about that. It's not about that. So no, I appreciate the conversation, and yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And just for clarity, there is no mask mandate in your area, is there?
Oh, 100%. There's not. No, there's no mask. That's the problem with our Ontario government. In the very beginning, when it's one of the reasons why I knew it was a scam, to be perfectly honest. When our government is saying to every single business, we don't care what plan you have, you just have to have a plan. So there's if it was actually something that was so dangerous and so deadly and all this stuff, there would be a set rule that everyone had to follow. And instead it was,
correct.
Oh, figure out what size it is for you, and that, have a note posted, and it just, so it's really our government to blame for allowing now a clinic that just decides they want to make everybody put on a mask to come in. So is the next one going to be you have to grab a skipping rope and do a couple jumps with it? Is that to come in the door? Is that next? So, at some point we have to realize that, did we do this in 2019? Did we do this in 2018? And if the answer is no, then stop doing it. Then stop doing it, because the world has not changed that much. It hasn't. We don't have all this new science that just says we need to do this, But no, quite an interesting time.
You're absolutely right. And none of it is by law. And that's the crazy thing for me. I remember just before we left, Thanksgiving hits in October, and what family wanted to be around us or not, and what was being put out in the newspaper, what was being put out on TV is make sure you have 10 people or less, make sure you check for vaccine passports for your family, right? Just where in history does that come, right? And so when we left at the end of October, both my husband and I said, we don't want to go to Christmas knowing full well people that were vaccinated could get COVID as well, and be the ones that were blamed for that. We don't want to. We don't want to be blamed for that, right? Well, we're probably the healthiest people out of all of our family, because we take our supplements and we exercise and we eat healthy and we do all this stuff, right? So we don't want to be blamed for that. And then lo and behold, January comes around and there's a family get together and everybody gets COVID and we're not there. And I just said, the relief that I had to not be blamed and be like, you guys can put connect the dots on this one, right? That you guys have all had these shots and that you're still getting COVID, and by the way, it's come out later on that they were never tested before they were released, about transmission. That was never tested. Oh no, right? All of it is so absurd that you would think that you were in a movie, but we're not.
100%.
And so thank you for having this conversation, so that this doesn't happen again, so that people that are watching can maybe they might not like what they hear, but at least it might trigger something in that, hey, maybe I should look into that, or maybe I should question it next time, or hey, there's a new vaccine coming down the pipeline for this new variant. Maybe I should look into what that is, or even if it's been approved by Health Canada, or what measures were taken to be approved by Health Canada in this situation, right? Because now they're scrutinizing natural health products and saying that those have to be, heavily regulated and taxed for sure. Right? Your vitamins, Lord knows, right? So thank you, Rob. Thank you so much for being here, having the conversation. I appreciate you. I'm going to continue to follow you. Where can people find you on Instagram?
My handle is Robbie J Realtor. That's it. ROBBIEJ, my last name, and then Realtor. So I don't know how long that account will be alive. We'll see. Now that it's it's just one of those things. I feel like you have to push back no matter what. I care about the future. I care about my kids, and you just have to. You just have to.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for all those that tuned in today on another episode of Freedom Motivated. We're so grateful for your time today, and we look forward to having other conversations that are like this, and also other conversations that have nothing to do with this, that are,
Absolutely.
allowing people to become free and make decisions based on what they want, who they are, and what their values and beliefs are. So
Absolutely.
thank you again, Rob. I really
No
appreciate
problem.
you.
No problem. Have a great day. Cheers.
You too. Bye.